My first job as a security guard was at an old hospital known for its eerie quiet at night. I started my shift at 10 p.m., just as the last of the day staff were leaving. The hospital had a long hallway that everyone joked was haunted because of the strange noises that echoed at night. One night, while walking down this hallway, I heard the sound of a wheelchair moving. I turned around, but there was nothing there. Thinking it was just my imagination, I continued my rounds. As I passed the old ward where patients from the 1950s were once treated, I heard it again. This time, when I turned, I saw the fleeting image of an old man disappearing into a room. I checked the room, but it was empty. My heart was racing, but I convinced myself it was just a shadow or a trick of the light. I continued my rounds, trying to shake off the fear. Later that night, I sat in the security room watching the monitors. That's when I saw it, a figure moving down the same hallway. I rushed there, but again found nothing. This happened several nights in a row. I began to feel watched, and the chilly drafts that seemed to follow me didn't help. Then, one night, I followed the sounds to the end of the hallway, and what I saw changed everything. The old man was there, clear as day, looking right at me. He didn't seem menacing, just lost and confused. He vanished as I reached out to him. After talking to a nurse who had been there for years, I learned about a patient from the 1950s who had passed away in that ward, always complaining about being cold and wanting to go home. I believe I was seeing his spirit, still wandering the halls looking for comfort or a way out. It was my first month working the night shift alone at a small 24-hour convenience store. The store was located on a quiet road, mostly frequented by late-night travelers or locals. One night around 3 a.m., the phone rang. A raspy voice asked, "Do you have any blue soda?" Confused, I checked and told the caller no. He just hung up. The same call came every night at the same time, asking for different odd items. "Do you have elephant-shaped cookies? Do you sell moonlight in a bottle?" Each time I would check, respond, and the caller would abruptly hang up. I started to feel uneasy, as if this caller knew more than they should. One night, driven by curiosity and a bit of fear, I decided to ask, "Who are you?" There was a pause, then laughter, and the caller hung up. The next night, as 3 a.m. approached, I was tense, expecting the call, but it never came. Instead, the door chimed as a figure shrouded in a hood entered. He walked straight to the counter, staring at me with intense eyes. "Got any ghost stories to share?" he asked, his voice unmistakable from the calls. Before I could answer, he pulled down his hood, revealing a surprisingly young face. He smiled. "I'm sorry. I've been the one calling. I work the night shift down the road. It gets lonely and boring." We both laughed, the tension easing. From that night on, he would stop by and we would exchange bizarre questions and stories to pass the quiet hours. The night shift wasn't so lonely anymore. When I got a job at the old warehouse on the outskirts of town, everyone told me it was boring. Just me, the night, and rows of boxes. But they didn't mention the whispers. My shift ran from dusk till dawn, and every night as I patrolled the aisles, I would hear them, soft, indistinct, as if two people were murmuring just out of sight. One night, curiosity overcame my hesitation. I followed the sounds to the back of the warehouse where old, unsold inventory piled up like forgotten memories. The voices grew clearer as I approached. They seemed to be coming from a dusty old radio that shouldn't have been working, but it was. The conversation was a loop, a fragment of a news broadcast from years ago about a local disaster. I turned off the radio, thinking it was just picking up residual signals, but the whispers didn't stop. They seemed to react to my presence, growing frantic. That's when I saw them, shadows darting between the stacks, shapes that were human but not quite. I froze, my heart pounding, as they seemed to notice me noticing them. The air grew cold, and I felt a gust as they rushed past me, the whispers stopping abruptly. I reported the incident to my supervisor, who reluctantly told me the warehouse used to store items from demolished buildings, some of which were sites of historical tragedies. Maybe, he suggested, some remnants of the past were clinging to their old possessions. I finished my contract at the warehouse but never walked the back aisles alone again. The whispers never returned, but the feeling of being watched never quite left me. Working the midnight shift at a roadside diner wasn't exactly thrilling, until one night that turned my mundane routine into something out of a mystery novel. The diner was usually quiet, a haven for truck drivers and late-night wanderers seeking coffee and a moment's rest. That night, a storm was brewing, and an old man stumbled in, soaked and shivering. He ordered a coffee and sat in a corner booth, his eyes darting around nervously. Every time the bell over the door jingled, he flinched. Curious, I approached to ask if he needed anything else. He leaned in and whispered that he was being followed, and that they had found him after many years. His tale was of hidden treasures, and a long-lost map that many believed was a myth. He claimed to have a piece of that map, and now, dangerous people wanted it. I was skeptical, but his fear seemed genuine. As the hours passed, the storm worsened, and only a few more customers came and went. The old man never touched his coffee, just kept glancing at the door. Near the end of my shift, a group of rough-looking individuals entered. The old man slipped a crumpled piece of paper into my hand and hurried out the back just as the group approached, asking about him. I denied seeing anyone, and after they left, I opened the paper. It was a map, or part of one, marked with cryptic symbols. I never saw the old man again, but sometimes late at night, new faces wander in, asking odd questions about maps and legends. Each time, I just clean the counter and shake my head, the folded piece of map safe in my pocket, a reminder of the night when my shift became part of a story too big to understand.